Becoming the leader of the country with the largest economy, military, and impact in the world means having a lot of power at your disposal, but it also comes at the cost of painting a massive target on your back. The President of the United States is one of the most heavily guarded people on the planet, but for a good reason. Of the 4 US presidents that have been assassinated, 3 of them occurred before the Secret Service began guarding the president. Despite being created on the day of President Abraham Lincoln's assassination, this organization was not originally formed to protect the president, but rather the nation's currency, and continues to fight counterfeiting even today. This is how the Secret Service was created, and this is Learn Something New. The 1860s were a difficult decade for the United States. The American Civil War kicked off in 1861, and by its conclusion, it would become by far the deadliest conflict in the nation's history, with more soldiers perishing than in World War I and World War II combined. But the ongoing conflict wasn't the only problem the US was dealing with. Although its official currency, the US dollar, was adopted as the national currency in 1863, local and regional banks were continuing to print their own money. The economic confusion was made far worse due to extreme amounts of counterfeiting, not just the paper bills, but also gold and silver coins fraudulently put into circulation. During the Civil War, counterfeiting became so severe that it was estimated during Lincoln's administration more than 1/3 of all money in the US was fake, though some estimates were as high as 50%. As the Civil War came to an end, President Lincoln immediately turned his attention to the counterfeiting issue, recognizing it as one of the biggest problems the country would be faced with next. On April 14, 1865, after meeting with his cabinet, Lincoln signed a piece of legislation that would authorize the creation of a new government agency whose sole responsibility would be to crack down on counterfeiters, though it would go on to be nearly universally known for its role in protecting the president. The creation of the United States Secret Service would be his last official act as president, as just hours later, Lincoln would go to Ford's Theater where John Wilkes Booth would assassinate him. Even as the nation mourned his passing, the new agency went to work, proving its effectiveness almost immediately. Its first chief, William Wood, a Civil War veteran, closed more than 200 counterfeiting plants in its first year alone. After this initial success, its mission was broadened in 1867 to include detecting persons perpetrating fraud against the government, and operated as part of the Department of Treasury. But while they continued bringing down those disrupting the US financial system, the danger to sitting presidents grew. Just 4 months after his inauguration, President James Garfield was heading toward the Baltimore and Potomac train station on his way to take a short break from the stressful duties of the presidency, made even more stressful after his wife, the First Lady, nearly died after contracting malaria. He made his way to the station entrance having no bodyguards or security of any kind, instead walking with his 2 teenage sons and the Secretary of State, James G. Blaine. Just inside the station, however, was Charles Guiteau, who had spent weeks stalking the president, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike after having a dream that led him to believe God wanted him to kill the 20th president. He snuck up behind the president as he entered into the waiting room and fired 2 shots. Despite his waning health over the next few days, Garfield would survive far longer than anyone expected. However, he ultimately passed away just over 2 months later due to infection. 16 years later, another tragedy would strike. While attending a public meet and greet at an expo following the end of the Spanish-American War, President William McKinley would ignore the security concerns brought up by his staff members, making his way to the long line of people waiting to meet him. One of these people was anarchist Leon Czolgosz, who was waiting with a gun concealed inside his jacket pocket. At 4:07 p.m., McKinley neared Czolgosz, who fired 2 shots. The president would pass away just over a week later from infection. Immediately following the assassination, Congress had had enough, informally requesting the Secret Service to allocate some men to provide around-the-clock protection for the vice president turned president, Theodore Roosevelt, with at least 2 agents guarding him at all times. In 1906, President Roosevelt wrote to a senator, "The Secret Service men are a very small but necessary thorn in the flesh." Wanting to give a more permanent protection to the president, Congress passed the Sundry Civil Expenses Act for 1907, allocating funds to the Secret Service for the sole purpose of presidential protection. Every president from then on would have a Secret Service detail guarding them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that prior to this point, every president was left completely unguarded. In fact, there was a long history of people protecting the nation's leader. As early as 1823, President James Monroe had guards outside of the White House, serving as tour guides during the day and protecting the president at night. Although many presidents would often leave their security behind when they went out, there were often local police or even volunteers willing to stand guard and patrol the area around the president's residence in the decades leading to the Civil War. President Franklin Pierce even had a full-time bodyguard, becoming the first president to do so. So to say the safety of the president wasn't a concern for the government would be misleading. However, most early presidents valued the autonomy provided by leaving their security behind when they left work. But even Abraham Lincoln was well aware of the constant threats to his safety, frequently keeping bodyguards around him. On the night of his assassination, he was being guarded by a DC police officer, though this particular officer had had a record of unreliability at work. So instead of staying in the president's box, the guard left to get a better view of the play, allowing Booth to slip in. This is to say, in order to clear up a common misconception, the Secret Service weren't the first people to protect the president, but when they were charged with the president's safety, they became the first to put vast resources solely into ensuring the president's safety, pre-planning routes, training agents on specific maneuvers and tactics, and thinking through worst-case scenarios before they were presented, both to prevent and to prepare for. As the invention and innovation of early planes persisted in the early 1900s, the world began to grow smaller, making enemies of the president appear closer than ever before as World War I was in full swing. And thus, in 1917, the amount of individuals under the protection of the Secret Service were expanded once again to include the president's immediate family. This was far from the end of their expansion, however, as they would grow to include the White House police force under their purview and, in 1951, also extended protection to the president-elect and vice president. Now, it includes all previously stated and the addition of major presidential candidates and their vice presidents and the widows of presidents until death or remarriage and their children reaching 16. While for several decades, the Secret Service would extend Secret Service protection to former presidents for the remainder of their lives, in 1997, this was changed to 10 years after leaving office, though those that had been elected prior to this year would continue to receive lifetime protection, though this decision would be reversed in 2013. To this day, the Secret Service continues to take an active role in arresting counterfeiters, but now, its more than 6,000 employees also work to ensure the safety of those at the head of the nation. Thank you for watching Learn Something New. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Or if you want, you can check out the channel's Patreon, linked below in the description. Special thanks to the channel's patrons, but as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.